So good morning, everybody. Welcome again at this program here at the ICI, organized by Savvy Contemporary. Thank you for being numerous also on a Saturday morning. And we're happy that you're joining us for the second day of the discussion of WIR SIND ALLE BERLINER, this discursive program that, as you all know, is commemorating the Berlin-Congo Conference. And there is growing also our exhibition project at Savvy, the exhibition curated by Njami and entitled, with the same title, WIR SIND ALLE BERLINER. Yesterday, we've been discussing about the historical context in which the conference happened. We've been discussing about the scramble for Africa before and after the scramble, on geopolitics, especially giving space and analyzing silenced, forgotten, or even denied, as Bili and Attia was stating, colonial histories. Today, with our 5 speakers, there are many, so we have to also watch time. Today we're going to focus on issues of citizenship and human rights, issues that were coming up yesterday already quite often, so we are really ready to dig into this concept, and especially we're gonna reflect on the right to have right. Especially I'm interested in discussing with our guest on the irreconcilable tension, let's say on the dichotomy between the principle of national sovereignty and the principle of human rights. Human rights can only be recognized, it looks like, if human rights can only be recognized within a national polity and realized along citizenship. But human rights, of course, mean nothing if they're not also the rights of the citizens. Means nothing if they're also the rights of the stateless, of those who not even have the rights to have the rights. And you will probably recognize I was using the words of Hannah Arendt. To address all these themes, I want to just point and to use the concept of Roberto Esposito, the political philosopher, that has been talking about the immunization paradigm. So this immunization paradigm of nation states and this entanglement, this paradoxical entanglement between protection and negation of life. As we were saying yesterday, as also Mantia was very beautifully stressing, sovereignty is implying violence, is implying that a state is more sovereign than another one, is implying that some people are more equal than others. So it's the principle of sovereignty is a principle of integrity. Of course, then is fighting the intruder and is destroying the life of people outside to preserve the life of people inside. So what Esposito is talking about is it's talking about all these securitization and security policies that nation states are building up against possible dangers and intrusions, and that are performed with border controls and sovereign measures. So, of course, the more we feel at risk of being infiltrated and infected, of course, the biological terminology works well also with this idea of immunitas, communitas, and this biopolitical metaphor. So the more then the life of individual and society closes off within its protective boundaries, focusing us to choose between a self-destructive outcome and a more radical alternative based on a new conception of community. So, especially in critical moments like this, but for Agamben, for example, not only in critical moments are always there, he's talking about a sort of permanent state of exception, state of emergency. But then biopolitics is shadowed by, yes, thanatopolitics or necropolitics, if we want to use Mbembe's words. So to make it short, sorry, I want to just read these few lines from Esposito's Immunization and Violence from 2008. He says, this preoccupation with self-protection doesn't only belong to our age. The threshold of knowledge with respect to risk becomes quite different over the course of time until it culminates precisely in our own period. This is due to a series of concurrent causes not far removed from what is called globalization, in the sense that more humans, but also ideas, languages, technologies, communicate and are intertwined, the more is generated a counter-trust, a demand for a preventive immunization. The recent identification with local groups can be explained as a sort of immunitarian rejection of that global contamination that is globalization. The more the self tends to make itself global, which is to say, the harder it tries to include what is located outside itself. The more it tries to introject every form of negativity, the more negativity it reproduces. So Esposito says that, of course, life is inscribed into law since antiquity, but then that modernity has intensified the logic of securization, security, and immunity. So if in the 20th century political climate looks like we have to make this, there are this imposition of choices, or security, or human rights, preservation of national states, or democratic community, exclusion or inclusion, then it's very important to discuss again about, yes, citizenship, and to understand concept of citizenship, especially in a Europe of flourishing racism and nationalism. So this is what we are going to do with our speakers. The main questions are, how can we enable people to construct and live out an identity in political systems that are using this immunitarian paradigm? And how can citizenship be performed, claimed, acted, and enacted in a different way? So we're going to start with Peggy, that as the people that were here yesterday already know her very well and know what she thinks, but she's going to give a proper paper. So, and I'm also properly introducing her. And if I'm saying too many things, just interrupt me. I just read through your biography. Peggy Pische is a black German scholar of literature and cultural science who was born and raised in the GDR. She taught at various universities like Leiden, Bochum, Bonn, and Berlin. She was research associate at Johannes Gutenberg Universität Mainz, working for the project Black European Studies. She taught at Hamilton College, New York, USA, and is currently a research fellow at the Bayreuth Academy of Advanced African Studies. Since 1990, she's member of the NGO ADEFRA, Schwarze Frauen in Deutschland. She published about racializing and black images, colonial history, and collective memory. Together with Maureen Maisha Eggers, Grada Kilomba, and Susan Arndt, she is the editor of Mythen, Masken und Subjekte, kritische Weißeinforschung in Deutschland. Okay, good. Let's listen to Peggy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also for the invitation, and yeah, today there is a lot going on in a parallel way, so I think it's really good that we are here, but yeah, we also wanted to be somewhere else. It's just the stories of our life. I titled my little talk like The Art of We and All Thinking Collective Belongings in the Age of Neo-Colonialism. And I'm not sure if I deliver on all of that, but this is the cornerstones where I was thinking about when I prepared that. Well, for some strange reasons, I seem to get the reputation of speaking too much and too long, so I'll be brief. I'll be brief. I also feel a little bit that I might have already said everything yesterday. However, I'm actually not going to talk about sovereignty. I mean, we are going to have a whole panel on that, but it isn't kind of an underlying pattern here. I rather concentrate on citizenship and in its relation between belonging, appropriation, and entitlement. And that will hopefully also bring us then to the larger context, what also the abstract already noted, of Appiah's quest for ethics of identity. But of course, like always, and reference in the beginning also to the title of the conference, which actually got me started to think along the lines of citizenship and collective belongings. Obviously, the title is a reference to the Berlin Conference. We established that already. But there seems to be something strange, at least for me, about being a Berliner. So besides the pastry and the Berlin Kuchen thing. But on a more serious note, this iconic reference is of course first and foremost connected to JFK's claiming a claimed sentence at the Berlin Wall. And in a pop cultural sighting travel, this iconic moment seems to be quoted all over since, and I think that is something which we have to take into account. So today, we seem to be all New Yorker since 2001. Je suis Charlie. And I also remind us of Madrid in 2004, where we had all of these moments, you know, today we are all in Madrid, or today we are all in London, and all of that. So the uncomfortable element of those sentiments are also inscribed in there, in this iconic thing, and or it better, so a better self-referential declaration, what we see here. For example, also when we, I remind us of this thing which took off the Berlin Wall from JFK when Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev torn down this wall, which is also inclines something, a we or a they. So besides my sensitive East German heart, which is of course triggered with, you know, Mr. Gorbachev torn down this wall, what seems to be in the play here? All of the above notions refer to and play on described definitions of belonging. They suggest alliances and solidarity, and by all means, they suggest choice. So I can decide whether to be all of that. While it celebrates itself, dancing on the right side of history, so that is very deeply embedded, this moral notion of we are on the right side of history, while it builds and perpetuates a notion of the transnational, the cosmopolitan, of the we, it also manifests and perpetuates the borders of these supposedly universal inclusions. It recreates the one who are not all Berliners. So behind the wall, for example, or turn down this wall, the other people of Berlin, the ones who actually then turned down the wall, or the people who are not identifying themselves with a racist, anti-Semitic satire magazine, they are all put aside in this collective claim, and they are put behind the border of this great group's feelings. The other aspects of this entitlement of belonging concerns the marking of that what we are not. So within this we are all Berliner, or I am a Berliner. So what we are not. Apparently we are all not Palestinians, we are all not Nigerians, and we are all not Kurdistan. And interestingly, we are also not all Ukraine, so that might be also in connection to our discussion yesterday, help us to understand this inclusion and exclusion of the we. The reference to the Berlin Conference, I think, which should also be part of our discussion, is actually going back to Mudimbe, one of the most influential contemporary African philosophers. Berlin and its conference invented in Africa that beyond all of the obvious violent historical facts and consequences, as we already established, but also first and foremost because of the complete absence of African people and perspective there. So this is also a large reference to Mudimbe. And since we are all here and there, since African and African diasporic people are for real, we are creating a space of resistance. So if Africa is an invention by the Berlin map created, but we are still here, we were there back then, so there must be a space of resistance. So for that, I propose that as much as Africa is an invention, it is also first and foremost a space of resistance. And here, of course, it's very important that we the notion of perspective, because it matters who claims and who can claim the space of resistance. That brings me to the point of citizenship. Claiming citizenship and belonging in an environment like the above is an act of resistance. Resistance against borders of belonging, which are only acceptable, we are Berliners, as a pastry. Let me give you a very brief historical overview of the German citizenship law, which we're actually talking about in the context. The German citizenship law dates back to 1905 and 1907 in a direct response to Germany's colonial enterprise after the Berlin Conference. So it was a discussion based on questions like how to keep so-called colonial migrants out of Germany, and especially how to respond to black Germans from the colonies. So a citizenship law was created, which is based on jus sanguinis, on the basis of blood, and not so much on the basis of collective belonging, place like that in the US, for example. And that, of course, was in the direct response to the Herero and Nama War in 1904 till 1906 in German Southwest colonies at the time, and also what we often forget, the Machi-Machi War of 1905 until 1907. In the context of those atrocities, which were also often referred to actually from the right and from the colonists themselves as so-called race wars, so-called racial purity took a new importance, and so-called race mixing was construed as treason. In the colonies, marriages which would have produced black German children entitled to German citizenship were administratively forbidden, also never outlawed in Germany itself. And here it starts actually also the kind of what I would call the craziness of German citizenship law, where we have different applications on the German soil and in the colonies itself. And existing marriages at the time in 1907 were annulled. Such attitudes would have an impact on Germany extending far beyond the colonial period. And as Fatima El-Tayeb has maintained, and I quote, German colonialism was both fed by and produced racialized notions of national identity, notions whose traces have been visible in German citizenship policies throughout the 20th century. And by that, I just want to include that this citizenship law is important not only for historical reasons, but it was into law until 2000, and that is when the German social democratic and left government started to reform it, and we have to emphasize on start to reform. We're still not there for 15 years later to have actually a different citizenship law. Despite those legal and administrative efforts, very few migrants were able to acquire German citizenship, recognized as subjects but not citizens of Germany before the war. They were classified as stateless after the colonies were lost, and from 1932 through the Nazi period, migrants and other black Germans were issued a so-called Fremdenpass, alien's passport, with the explicit specification that, I quote, the barrier does not possess German nationality. And that should ring a bell when we look about what kind of legal belongings people have here in Germany right now throughout after World War II with regard to the German, to the Turkish-German community, but also what I find really interesting, the first discussions about how to respond to ISIS with some kind of stamps in the passport that you cannot leave the country or that this is not a legal document for international travel. So that all goes back to that. In her groundbreaking 1997 study, An Afro-German History on the Life Situations of Africans and African Germans in Germany from 1884 till 1950, Katharina Oguntoye, who is also co-editor of Showing Our Colors, compiled information about colonial migrants in Germany from the archives of the Imperial Colonial Office in order to dispute the claim, and as she puts it, I quote, that there weren't any, and if there were any Africans here, they couldn't have survived the hostile German environment. So what we see here, and that is, so I keep that brief, we can come back to that in the discussion, that already in this time there was going on this notion of trying to get visible, trying to claim visibility, and also for that claiming citizenship and disclaiming. I will come to that in a moment. Pascal Grosse observed that through quantitatively colonial migration was an insignificant phenomenon within the history of migration in Germany, which is always referred to. Qualitatively, the presence of colonial migrants required Germany to develop political, legal, and intellectual criteria to organize ethnocultural differences as racial politics, with ominous consequences for Germany's future. A colonial migrant, for example, Pundu Akwa, a member of the Douala royal family, published the first periodical by black people in Germany. It was a 52-page magazine that advocates for more African sovereignty in Cameroon that appeared in German and Douala before World War I. So this is a really rough draft summary of the German citizenship law. We are actually talking, or the basis, what we are still talking about when we talk about citizenship in contemporary Germany. And that shows us that it was designed first and foremost to avoid so-called intruders. So the whole idea to create a citizenship law is how to keep certain people out and how to maintain a status quo, and by that also define the status quo, which we need to really emphasize what it was, and it was not a legal definition of who was born here, but it was, and that is a quote from the debate, the parliamentarian debate in 1905, "We are white and we are German and we want to stay German." So this is not just an outrage, a quote, but it is deeply embedded in this notion of Germanness. What is Germanness still today, that it equals whiteness, that it is so incomprehensible to see Germanness, and by that also citizenship, other than white. So in this environment, claiming citizenship, claiming visibility is an act of resistance, as I already posed. Acting in a sense of conceptualizing belonging in a sense of what are you doing if you are in your own country, always been negated and denied the citizenship. So we do have a passport, well, I say black Germans in the same legal position as I am, and that of course is a lot because it helps me from not getting deported somewhere. It helps me also in certain legal situations. However, what is also inscribed in our collective beings means that going, for example, to the US, never getting questioned any kind of belonging. It's the woman with the funny accent, and the country is big, so she might not be from around here, but from somewhere else. And coming back home, it means being not just the obvious questions, so where are you from and when are you going home, but it's deeply rooted and embedded notion of not comprehending that we are Germans in a sense. Performing, on the other side, would be a conglomerate of claiming, and also what I already mentioned, disclaiming citizenship. And that is the political aspect of the activist movements, which I also want to bring into the discussion, where it is not just all about how to become German or being more German than Germans or something like that. But actually what we can see very nicely in the political activist movements and the history of the Black German movements and the two major organizations of ADEFRA and ISD, where already in the name it started out as Afro-Germans and Afro-German people and Afro-German women, and later changed to Black women in Germany and Black people in Germany, and that was is a direct intervention into exactly these discourses. So what it means is for also Black activists enacting citizenship in Germany on a daily basis that we do both. We are claiming it because the moment we go to bed, everything what we achieved is gone again. So we're going up in the morning, claiming it again, the visibility, we're still here, we didn't go anywhere overnight. And at the same time also to basically put the finger on what this notion is, which is we are white and we are German and we want to stay German, and to disclaiming citizenship, to put ourselves in a larger position, Black people in Germany, for example, here. So these all is an active act of resistance which disturbs the white hegemonic notion of citizenship, which gives the idea of the intruder in actually a whole new spin, which disturbs borders, which disturbs this belonging, and which disturbs this notion of solidarity, what I referred to in the beginning. So in my final statement here, I would argue twofold, that African and African diasporic people live in both multiple specialities and multiple temporalities, because we are all connected to these times. And the second, on considering the colonial order of things in the light of all what we said, we are indeed all Berliners. I tried to stay brief.
So thank you, Peggy. No, now we want also to have a lot of interaction between the panelists. So for sure we're going to keep it short. So we will have the time at the end of all the papers to discuss. But of course we can take a pair of questions. Yes.
Thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. I have a question coming from the British context. What you see there is that Black activists developed a British sense of you can be Black British. So I was just wondering how you look at that. Is that, do you want to create a Black German discourse in the way that Britain has? And is that a real solution? It's just a question, because there are good things about being Black British, but there are also dangers.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, we just saw that in this beautiful project from ACOMFA, the Stuart Hall project, where the discussion of what is the Black British. I think we do have a discourse on Black German, certainly with respect to the history, to critical whiteness. A lot of theoretical interventions came from exactly this discourse, and who, if not we ourselves, created this discourse. What it is also in a sense of, like what I see with my limited understanding of the context of the UK, blackness has always been set in a transnational context. So Black German experience is not thinkable without the Black British experience, and Black British experience is very much also referring and being informed by Black German or the Black European experience in this matter. So that is what all, and we have a lot to do here in a sense of mapping and claiming our own history in our own space of, critical diaspora studies in this sense. So what I see is it is in both ways important, and that makes us, claiming and unclaiming at the same time by not getting, erased and invisible again in the very place we are, but also making it very clear that that doesn't mean that we support a certain national discourse, that it is actually always to be seen in a transnational discourse, because we have a shared experience, which is not bound to the national.
Yeah. Other questions? So maybe just another little remark. Of course, it's important not to get stuck in these national borders and this problem of national sovereignty. So maybe can you say something? You was also using the word cosmopolitanism, that of course is a very charged word. But how do you which sense is, as for you, the word cosmopolitanism, in which kind of political direction you are?
Well, I thought I'm actually very proud that I was brief. If you ask me now about the cosmopolitan, I'm afraid it's
just then we can keep it for afterwards.
It's going
if
down.
You think it's going to be 2 hours?
But very briefly, I think what we have to keep in mind, and we talked about that already yesterday, we cannot just use in this popular fiction. That's why I tried, to refer to JFK and all of that. But there is more behind than this, the pop cultural references. And cosmopolitanism is not to understand, or we cannot understand it the same way as human rights if we are not going back to the Enlightenment. And cosmopolitanism was developed as a concept not for everybody. So I'm very critical of this whole concept, of this whole notion, because the so-called Weltbürger, which was invented in Germany, not necessarily in Berlin, probably more like in the eastern province at the time, but it was invented as a concept where Germans, which didn't have a national belonging, which didn't have a national, but could see themselves in a larger Western setting, in a larger white setting. So cosmopolitanism was never meant to be something for Africans, was never meant to be for Asians. I don't say that we shouldn't claim it because it was not meant for us, but that is still embedded in it. So when we talk about cosmopolitanism, again, I would ask, who is the we? Who is allowed to be cosmopolitan? Because if it goes about the traveling, the mobilization, being mobile, as you said in your beginning, of the global space, global realm, we have whole other settings of mobilizations and being mobile, like, a group of refugees, people, labor migrants, they are all not to be seen as the cosmopolitans, They are not to be seen as being able to claim that. So we have to be very careful with that. But that was very brief.
Also, thanks from me. I think that applies basically to most of the concepts we use, because even citizenship was not meant to really include everybody, So what was I think it's also, as you said, also about claiming that position. If I claim to be a Weltbürger, even if it wasn't meant for me to be it. It is my, you know, my position, my right. That's what I see on the enactment. And when Rosie Bardotti was talking about the enacting of the European citizenship, you know, I think that's what the claiming of a certain position and taking it up to yourself, you know. So, and I think many of those small acts of claiming, you know, create a collectivity as well, you know, which is also, you know, what I was talking about, being subversive and claiming a position from the other side, you know, whatever the other side might mean. But I think that claiming a citizenship or claiming the Weltbürger status is one of those possibilities, you know, although those concepts are not meant to include whoever.
Very, very shortly. I agree with you to a certain extent. I mean, what we also have to keep in mind is, where does it end? You know, I mean, I just talked about claiming and reclaiming, and I think that's really what we have to do. On the other hand, it is also claiming in a sense, as you just described, means we are adding on to something. So the actual the root and the essence of what cosmopolitanism is not changing by that. But now we are also fashionable. You know, we are also so cool because we are comprehensible. We are now, you know, wearing these clothes. We are having the cell phones. We are traveling all over the place. That seems to be cosmopolitan. You know, but it is not that we are changing the notion itself. And my question would also be, do we have to change the notion, or is it not to actually also see at certain points to claim something else? By this unclaiming citizenship, as we do in the same time of claiming, I'm not throwing away my German citizenship. I would do not in 1,000 years. And I always say, you know, if you want me out, you have to strip me of the citizenship, because that is what we had before. But at the same time, I say I unclaim it, you know, by positioning myself as a black person in Germany, also not to go with this hype of Germanness. So I think that's are the subversive spaces we have to look at. And a lot we don't have to invent, but actually to value our own history. And there is a notion which is actually been countering the Western Enlightenment notion of cosmopolitanism, and that is Pan-Africanism. Mantia already talked about that yesterday.
And we will continue because we're discussing all together afterwards. So now I'm introducing Nana. Nana Adusei-Poku is a researcher professor in cultural diversity at Rotterdam University and guest lecturer in media arts and master fine arts at the University of the Arts in Zurich. She was a scholarship doctoral student at Humboldt University, working on the curatorial concept post-black in relation to contemporary black artists, called Rooted in, but not limited, by reiteration of post-black art, following degrees in African Studies and Gender Studies at Humboldt University and in Media and Communication at Goldsmiths College, University of London. She has been a visiting scholar at the University of Ghana, the London School of Economics and the Columbia University, as part of an interest to expand the means of knowledge production. Nana is developing collaborative performance lectures which use the realm of the aesthetic in order to counter classical academic notion of presentation and communication. As part of the interdisciplinary transnational artist collective, how do you say I'm an African? She is currently working to her next professorship as curatorial fellow at Witt de Witt Center for Contemporary Art in Rotterdam on a show with the collective, which will open on May 21st. So I think you're invited.
Yes. Come all to Rotterdam, please. Yes, please do so. Well, actually, I would love to talk about Afropolitanism right now. I just would love to change my paper, but that's unfortunately impossible. But thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's been a pleasure so far. I don't even have a title for my paper, and probably that's part of the performance. So let me start. Like a film still, a topless man in shiny black leggings stands on an empty stage. The room is dense and warm. He has a microphone stand in his mouth. His eyes flip to the back and only the white of his eyeballs is visible. The body is transformed into a sculpture, a non-body and a non-place that seems to overcome the forces of the statics and the modes of language. The boundary between the in and outside of his body are crossed by the swallowing of the stand. That reminds me of a forceful fist, a giant sex toy. Images of Jean Genet's 1950s short film reappear on my mind. Genet reflects in Enchant d'Amour not only about the impossibility of queer desire, power and violence that is drawn upon the colonized and incarcerated bodies in the French colonial, and here in particular, Algerian context. But he also uses the aesthetic as a possibility to counter, elucidate and perform the complex intersubjective tensions that colonialism has produced in a time in which neither the continent was decolonized and same-sex love was illegal. So we're talking about 1950, right? Whilst my thoughts wander off to Genet, looking at Ahmed Soura's performance, I realized that meanings in their temporalities start to overlap. My questions and observations create the link between the different somatic affects that his body, the warm, heavy air, his movement and sonic experience create. I start wondering about the impossibility of speech, which Hannah Arendt would see as the basis of political agency in the context of this conference and its historicity. When Soura, the performer, starts dancing with the stand in his mouth, when he pushes it over the floor. Although he holds the stand in his mouth, he is in charge of the situation. Although silent, he doesn't lose control. His body starts a gestural conversation with an invisible subject, which could be embodied by the stand or somebody behind it. His gestures become demanding. I encounter a sense of intense energy. Somebody seems interpellated, called upon by his gestures, but no response. Since that force, which he seems to be in touch with, is an invisible one, I start wondering if this power can also be an idea, a concept, the non-embodied realm of thought that seems to bind the colonial past in the present. The video pieces that were screened in the background at some point in the performance do not clearly connect to the performance itself. The landscape of landfill or the depiction of supermarket shelves with various goods. But they put another layer to the assemblage of questions and readings that I experience. These questions cannot be solved as the performance progresses pretty fast. Soura created an affective space through the subtle electronic sound and leaves me changed. Something has manifested itself. I don't know really what. That leaves the realm of language and creates the basis for an understanding of the world that is intrinsic, I argue, to this program. So for those who have been part of Thursday's performance night, recognize some of the observations that I have just briefly sketched out. So that what I'm aiming to do is to look at the questions of this panel on enacting citizenship on various levels, but with a special focus on the importance of arts and aesthetics as one of our main tools to reconceptualize and experience the present. And I will address the questions of citizenship through first political reality, which actually Peggy already did, so I don't have to do that much. And secondly, I would like to look less at the philosophical groundings of citizenship, which I hope we are able to do later on, but to look more at the question of pedagogy. And that last question will lead me thirdly to the aesthetic practices as a means through which we are able to understand the contemporary. So I think in light of the urgency of the question that we engage with, I have to stress and emphasize in a very similar way that I am speaking from a Black diasporic position, which is, as Gayatri Spivak reminds, still a privileged one, however mistreated I feel in the global north. In spite of the hostility and epistemic violence that my body and very being might be exposed to in Europe, in the European context, if not in a global context as a black woman, I have a passport from birth, so I'm like a later generation, that allows me to vote, to move around this globe to wherever I want to go. If we look at the subject of citizenship, I belong to those who benefit from being a German citizen and member of the EU. I have rights and obligations. I know that this can be perceived as an inconvenient truth, and it's a critical position, but particularly when one experiences institutional racism, feels frightened when right-wing organizations and everyday racism, xenophobia is on the rise in Germany, if not in Europe. And when one is through language and representations constantly reminded not to belong in this society as a black subject. I'm repeating a little bit here. Nevertheless, I have to quote Spivak again when she pointed out, I'm not interested in desires, I'm interested in needs. I think this distinction is of great importance because apart from the amnesia and systematic denial that was addressed yesterday, there's a clear aftermath of the Congo Conference, which resulted in the constant and ongoing exploitation of the African continent. And this is what I call political reality, because when I'm in shock and hurt by the masses of African refugees that drown in the Mediterranean Ocean or remain untreated victims of the Ebola virus, for instance, I have to see that our lives are entangled in a very violent way, which leads me to the philosophical question of the question of citizenship, or further to the pedagogical one. And this demands to unfold this question which undergirds our conversation: who belongs to humanity and who doesn't? Alexander Wehaile shows beautifully in Habeas Viscus where Agamben and Foucault failed to address the subject of conceptualization of the human from their particular gendered and racialized position, and instead neglected an ongoing discourse by black feminists. And I know we can actually go on into that later on, but I would like to stress that point, what knowledge production can do to the reproduction of the notion of who belongs and who doesn't. And this is systematic, and I think that Bilgi Ayat yesterday referred to the manufacturing of amnesia. So I want to quote, or denial, and denial, amnesia and denial, exactly. So I want to quote Junot Diaz, who refers to the systematic outwriting, in a way, of black feminist thinkers. She says, women of color writers were raising questions about the world, about power, about philosophy, about politics, about history, about white supremacy, because of their race, gendered, sexualized bodies. They were wielding a genius that had been cultivated out of their race, cultivated out of their race, gendered, sexualized subjectivities. That these women are being forgotten and their historical importance elided says a lot about our particular moment and how real a threat these foundational sisters pose to the order of things. Yet because women of color writers articulate their critiques as a result of and in relation to their identities, the knowledge they produce is often relegated to ethnographic locality within mainstream discourses. So I'm stressing this point because all I hear also at this conference is Fanon, Glisson, César, etc., and other names of African and diasporic cis men who dominate our contemporary discussions, whilst establishing themselves as subjects and reproduce the violence on the black female thinkers and activists. And actually we have listened to that yesterday night as well. I mean, I love Mantia. I really love his work, it's important, but I think it's important to raise the issue that when it comes up to the 14 thinkers of the Negritude, and they're all men. You know? It's like, oh, point taken. So this neglect, and here I see it as the one of the fundamental manufacturing of denial, reproduces the very same paradigms that we try to contest here. So again, who is human and worthy to be listened at or to. The questions posed by the organizers and creators of the show about citizenship are going to the ground of the question, which is the gap and tensions between political activism within the pedagogical and institutional frame and the realities by people, in example, on the shores of Lampedusa or in asylum seeker shelters, because it stresses the impossibilities that our practices are fundamentally based on the notion of exclusion. Pedagogy and disciplining, which goes along with the foundation of the modern nation state, thus human classifications and nation building, which Foucault describes in Discipline and Punishment, need to be reformed or even, I would say, taken apart. Now let's take it apart first and then reform it. So what are the possibilities? I think that Peggy, our paper intersects there very beautifully, because I wanted to give you an example of a very heterotopic space that I experienced through being part of the How Do You Say Yaman African collective. And we define ourselves as part of the diaspora. And I think, and it never occurred to me more than this morning, that the diasporic concept is the counterculture of modernity, what Paul Guerra is basically talking about. So the Yams is a queer of color collective of 40 people, basically predominantly in the US, but also around other parts of the world. It's a queer of color collective with, it's transdisciplinary. We kind of found each other through becoming friends. It's a holistic adventure because it's also about the notion of healing, empowerment, and it's claiming a space which is not based within any sort of like national identity, but it's more like based within the questions that we have to and want to explore together. And it's interesting because it takes not place within the institution. And I think that's also a link where Adefra, you know, where we can reference Adefra, where we can reference other spaces which create this kind of heterotopia, and I'm referring to Foucault here again, that create possibilities. No? And it's a way of claiming, to go back to what Bonaventure mentioned. So when I'm speaking of aesthetics, and this is really important because it is an artist collective and not everybody in the collective will call themselves artists, I'm referring to Nka, a Yoruba term which allows to think art and aesthetics as a holistic communal project. Within this framework, I see the necessity for an understanding which derives from the body. It is filled with emotional and intellectual support and thus allows to become a transformative force. Looking at the Yams from that perspective, it allows to stress that it is a space for healing, empowerment, support, learning, and inspiration. It acknowledges difference and nevertheless emphasizes that there is no outside of the diaspora. You know, like, where's the outside? There are no boundaries. So what I try to point out with the narrative in the beginning, and I finish here, of Ahmed Surat performance is that we have to acknowledge other means and instruments that allow to open up a space for thought and exploration of the question of being in this world. Cultural practices and aesthetics that help to create dissonances, contest, and change.
Thank you very much, Nana. Also because you addressed themes that we still didn't really address, and themes that are very important also for us at Savvy Contemporary, because we are always also working with aesthetic and we're concentrating on performance and on the body as a site of discourse.
That's why I did
and
it.
also thank you for remarking the importance of listening also to the female position and also black female. So as before, we're going to take only 2 questions because then we want to go further to the discussion. Oh, I see 2 hands. So very good. Monica.
Thank you so much. I had the privilege to see Good Stock on a Dimension floor and actually screened it at the Logan Center in Chicago. So unfortunately you weren't there, but 9 people were there, so it was beautiful. And I thought to ask maybe if you could share a little bit about a kind of process of communal citizenship that takes place within the collective. So some of the ways that the 40 of you or so managed to get together and think together and be together and create. Well, I think it's quite important to think about the nitty-gritties of citizen of that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's true. I think, I mean, first of all, it's only possible due to contemporary media. So if there wouldn't be Skype, no, Skype is actually not usable anymore because you can't do conference calls. So Google Hangout is the place where we hang out from time to time. Whilst curating the show in Rotterdam, my time has shifted, so I'm actually like staying up much longer in order to be able to find time to communicate. We only have one non-US and non-European citizen who is, so we, for instance, like when very practically, like right now we have to apply for a Schengen visa, etc., etc. And in terms of working together, it's hello. Yeah. So what I wanted to say, it's actually quite funny because the work process, when I mean holistic, like so many of the questions that we talk about here are actually the fundamental questions that we talk about all the time in the collective. So you have an experience and you share that, or you gather knowledge, and we have an email thread where we can just like throw knowledge out. We have a blog, an internal blog where we throw like post images, etc. It's an aesthetic sharing, but it's also a personal sharing. So, for instance, I mean, the Way Black Machine, which was one of the major recent installations by the collective. Oh, it's beautiful that I can address this because it basically is a multi-channel installation of internet or online footage that is in connection to Ferguson. So every material around Ferguson has been collected collectively. So somebody sent out, hey, you have to start collecting and send me the links. So we just sent the links all to Richie, and Richie accumulated it, took it out of the internet, and then we created that installation together. So it's very contemporary in the sense of what kind of role it plays. It's essential to it in order to be able to communicate. And I think that's also so beautiful when you think about the larger diaspora and how you stay in contact with your family right now, right? So it is somehow borderless. The internet gives us the possibility.
Always controlling you, but there is the second question. Angela, but before
thank you very much, Nana. I can't see you, sorry. That was really nice, and I'm so happy to learn about your group and everything. And I just wondered if you could tell us some of the names of the female thinkers, because I appreciate very much that you brought that up. And I think just to name them, to throw out the names here in this conference would be a really good thing. And then also I want the list for my teaching. I want a whole list so I can look it up. Thank you.
Well, that is extremely difficult for me because I don't, honestly, like when I think about like contemporaries to César and Glissant, and when you look at the first, help me out, Peggy, please. What's the name of the conference? The first where they all met and Krumah was there, and you know, like all these guys. Yeah. What was the name? What was the name? Artist in right. Oh, so there was like it was. but okay, so it was like a gathering of all of these thinkers. Yes, Présence africaine in 1956, where all these men, the men's club met, and it was a men's club. So I cannot tell you a female name. Like there were, I mean, I have to do my research better because I'm also reproducing Glissant, Fanon, you know. Well, I mean, who challenges that notion? Of course, like in the contemporary Hortense Spiller, Sylvia Wynter. I mean, you know, we can go on and on, but we can also create a reading list about that. But there are enough contemporaries who actually challenge that. Or even there's a fantastic book which actually challenges the entire négritude because it's all based in vitalist, French vitalist thinking. I think that is something that Mantia also loves to leave out.
The Nauman sisters were contemporaries of César and Clisson, Bonaventure and her sister. Sisters, and they were also editors of final important magazine. And obviously we have Sylvia Wynter, you know, as one of the really strong feminist female thinkers, you know, on these issues. Suzanne César. Yes.
Hey, hello. I was just thinking maybe it's not the moment to pose this question because of how to find time to discuss it. But I'm asking myself more and more in these moments about the role of art and aesthetics within the questions of immediacy and expression. And I feel like from the experience that I can refer to as being perhaps a person who has moved within the movements of the 90s and later on in terms of migration politics in Germany, etc. I think that the question of distancing tools that are invented in the form of aesthetics and arts itself are not referred or not critically really understood in terms of what that means politically, because it seems to be that that the problem is that in the moment that there is an invention of, let's say, an aesthetic possibility or tool, that it has to kind of have this action or this kind of potentiality of distancing towards something which is the immediacy of the political expression. So I think we had a lot of experiences in this terms in how to refer to the migration movements inside of Germany and how this is entering or not entering the political debates in Germany in a sense. So I would be interested to understand if we are talking about that as well, about the the very problems of politics in relation to a formation of aesthetical tools that are actually necessary tools that need to produce a form of distance towards the political field itself.
Danke, Angela.
Sorry to make this.
It's so clear that you're going to ask a question like that. I think I have. Can we postpone that maybe for the round?
I think it's
discussion?
I understand.
It's a fantastic question, and I have some time to think about it. So we have a political agenda, so we continue with another female body. We have Sara now, Sara Mazuz. I read your bio again, and stop me if you think it's too rhetoric. So Sara Mazuz completed her PhD, The French Republic and her others, Anti-Discrimination Policies and Practices of Naturalization in France in the years 2000 at École des Hautes Études in Paris in 2010. From November 2010 and June 2013, she conducted postdoctoral research on the multidisciplinary research program Morals, Towards a Critical Moral Anthropology, constructing an ethnography of the Youth Employment Center in the suburb of Paris,
Her work explored the values, moral and emotional issues involved in the relationship between young people, mostly from working class and immigrant origins, and their advisors. Her research interests include the anthropology of administration, politics of anti-discrimination, migration and citizenship in France and Germany, processes of racialization, gender, intersectionality, and post-colonial studies. Since October 2013, she has been postdoctoral fellow at Mark Bloch Center and at the Institute for Europäische Ethnology at the Humboldt, where she works on dual citizen issues in Germany. Thank you, Sarah. We are looking forward.
Thank you. Does it work? Yeah. So, thank you. My presentation deals with the naturalization process in France to show how national borders are produced through administrative criteria, but also through moral ones and identity ascription as well. It draws on field work led between 2004 and 2008 in the naturalization office of a préfecture, which is the administrative offices that represent the central state in each département. This préfecture was one of the Greater Paris area. This presentation mainly focuses on the observation of the linguistic assimilation interviews, entretien d'assimilation linguistique, that serve as a means to update the application and are primarily aimed at assessing both the applicant's level in French and implicitly their cultural assimilation. These interviews are the signal instance of naturalization process in which the applicants meet the bureaucrats in charge of their case. They provide, therefore, the empirical opportunity to observe the interactions that take place between both sides of the desk. These interviews last 15 minutes on average. They are conducted in the naturalization office of each préfecture. The bureaucrat who assesses the applicants with regard to French citizenship belong to the lowest grade of state employees. They don't have any specific training in law relating to foreigners or citizenship. They just learn by doing. Drawing on political anthropology of the state, I would like to examine both institutions and subjects. First, I will describe the moral economy of naturalization in contemporary France and the way it has been modeled by immigration issues. I will then examine how bureaucrats in charge of naturalization assess that applicants deserve to become French. Finally, I aim at questioning how bureaucratic process impact naturalized citizens' subjectivities in order to put into question the relation between administrative control and produced modes of subjectification. So, by the beginning of the years 2000, the French state attributed new importance to naturalization as mode of acquiring French citizenship. First, greater number of people have been granted French citizenship through naturalization. Second, collective ceremonies have been instituted for conferring naturalization certificates on approved applicants. This indicates a shift in French policy for integrating foreigners, because up until then, they were mainly made into Frenchmen through jus soli and W soli. However, successive controversies that attempted to undermine jus soli as a way to grant automatically French citizenship gave a newly central role to naturalization from the 80s onwards. Thus, as a consequence of the focus on nation-state borders, naturalization was more particularly reinvested at precisely the moment the state was applying tighter immigration controls. There are several ways of acquiring French citizenship, including through marriage and by birth. In these situations, obtaining French citizenship is a right, and only exceptionally can this change in status be contested by the state. Naturalization is different since the foreigner expresses her or his wish to be French, and the public authority has discretionary power to grant or refuse the French citizenship. Thus, as the Conseil d'État, the state's highest administrative jurisdiction, has repeatedly recalled, meeting the various conditions required by the Code de la Nationalité does not grant a person a right to be naturalized. Naturalization remains a favor in connection with which the administration has broad evaluation powers. Furthermore, naturalization concerns first-generation immigrants who have not necessarily been socialized in France. It is like adopting those who, among foreigners, have learned to behave like nationals and have the most exemplary trajectory. Therefore, the set of requirements suggests that much is expected from the applicant, and this is confirmed by the reiterated themes of being done a favor or being selected on merit. Some speeches pronounced during naturalization ceremonies still recall that naturalization is a favor that the Republic has granted to certain applicants because it judged that they deserved it, thus making it explicit that in order to become French, the naturalization candidate must be worthy of the citizenship he or she has requested. Despite its vague content, the notion of being deserving, therefore, plays a role in the evaluation process of applications for naturalization and in the selection of candidates. Only the applicants who appear most deserving, while also fulfilling all the requirements, will be naturalized. Only those who are most loyal to France and whose conduct and trajectory best embody the values of the Republic will be considered deserving and also obliged to the nation. And of course, there's a colonial background in this practice, since in Algeria, for example, at the time of when Algeria was a colony, those who were musulmans d'Algérie, I mean the Algerian, they were French national but not citizen, and if they wanted to get the citizen right, they had to apply for naturalization as well, and only those who are judged deserving but worthy enough to be French were granted the French citizenship, and there was at the time dignity was a criteria. So we can see that during the discussion. So now the deservingness frame of naturalization is all the more enhanced since it is now the length of the procedure that provides a mean to assess the applicant's merit. Indeed, due to the reduction or removal of the required length of residence in France prior to being eligible for naturalization and the abolition of the incapacities of naturalized people, the applicant must prove himself or herself before being granted the French citizenship. The naturalization procedure thereby reinforces the asymmetrical aspect of bureaucratic relationship, which aims at producing a form of difference on the part of the public service user. The officers at the naturalization office do not consider that they are dealing with public service users. Applicants to whom they may potentially grant a favor are obliged to them and do not exercise a right. Expression such as good applications or bad application instead of complete or incomplete applications are telling slips of the tongue. They reveal the moral aspect present in the assessment of application and show how the practices implemented during the naturalization procedure combine both administrative criteria and value judgments related to the very person of the applicants. The assessment of the candidate's education and qualification is presented as an important element in determining their linguistic ability and their deservingness. It also shows the way in which the bureaucrats perceive the level of education of the applicants. Mrs. Thibault, one of the bureaucrats I observed, Ask an applicant of Bangladeshi origin about his level of education. He explains to her that he reached a level equivalent to the baccalaureate and of high school diploma in France. He specifies that the names are different and the system is not the same as in France. She exclaims, "Oh, in Bangladesh, it seems everyone gets to baccalaureate level. I can well imagine that it is not the same level." She is therefore about to write that he has a level of primary education, despite the fact that it is clear from what the applicant is saying that he continued studying long after primary school. He then says college in reference to the English meaning of the word. She writes collège in its French meaning, which corresponds to the level of junior high school. The same type of misunderstanding and value judgment occurred in all the interviews I observed with applicants from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. When the candidates specifically stated that things were different than in France, the bureaucrats took it as recognition on the part of the applicants that there was a difference in value between the qualifications they had obtained in their country of origin and French qualifications. They understand it as the confirmation of what they already think about the discrepancy between French degrees and degrees offered in countries such as Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. Failing into the trap of a false friend also serves as a revealing blunder. The Naturalization Bureau officers' evaluation of applicants' educational level is based more upon shared categories of perception about the education system in the countries of origin than upon what applicants actually tell them. Conversely, in most cases, having obtained qualifications in France or completing further training enhances the naturalization candidate's profile, since it is perceived as a sign that the candidate is making an effort to become integrated in French life. Still, the applicant must strive in order to really deserve French citizenship. Therefore, they also must show that they try to do things like French-born citizens without managing to equal them and to not have prestigious qualification that might make them feel that they no longer have to make any further effort to be like French. The linguistic assimilation interviews implicitly serve to undermine the extent to which the applicant conforms to supposed French customs, since the bureaucrats are required to systematically indicate if a female applicant attends the interview wearing a veil, regardless of her level of French. This shift from linguistic to cultural assessment also has implications for the practice of the bureaucrats. Indeed, they consider from the outset that a woman wearing a veil will not know how to speak French. The applicants keenly feel the way in which administrative and moral requirements are intertwined throughout the naturalization procedure. For instance, they fill out carefully the documents requested of them. Most candidates also make an effort to be well-dressed when they attend the linguistic assimilation interview. Most of them wear classic clothing in dark and discreet colors. Some female applicants seem to have gone to the hairdresser for a blow-dry. And in this specific case, where for Black or North African women, this means having the hair straightened, this also indicates that presenting well involves attempting to erase a racialized marker. And it shows how the moral judgment of the administration intersect with race and is even a way to express racialized judgment, which are perceived by the applicants. The time and age at which the applicants should request a naturalization application form also reveal that they did not always feel legitimate or worthy enough to make this request earlier. Mr. Nyanga, a computer scientist from Congo-Brazzaville, explained, for example, that due to his situation as an unemployed person at the beginning, he didn't consider that he was worthy enough to request French citizenship. And he, during the interview, he makes in French a kind of mistake, because instead of saying it was not the proper time, I mean approprié in French, he said propre, which means also clean. And he said, I think by Mr. Nyanga eliminated himself because he considered not only that his status as an unemployed person was not suitable, but also because his status seemed improper to him. And so we see in his kind of slip of the tongue that what is presented as an objective criteria, I mean, it is better to have a job than to be unemployed, also take on the status of moral value that will not come into play and make someone begin the naturalization process or not. Naturalized persons also subscribe to some of the distinctions made by the bureaucrats of the naturalization office. It is to distinguish themselves from those who are not worthy of being French, in particular foreigners who don't want to become integrated, or those who speak French badly. The terms defining the expectations of administration in terms of cultural assimilation can be seen once again in the words of naturalized individuals. They insist upon the natural link between them and French culture, and more generally Western culture. It is to express something that makes sense to them, while at the same time attempting to deflect any suspicion or doubt about that may still wait upon them. And this should also be understood as the expression of a justificatory stance in which a feeling of success coexists with a feeling of illegitimacy. This ambiguous stance, also appears in the way in which applicants find it difficult to state that thanks to naturalization, they will obtain new rights, in particular the right to vote. They would mention rights that they already have rather than one they will acquire through naturalization. Thus, while according to the bureaucrats, the question of rights and duty of French citizens should allow applicants to explain why they have decided to become French and to show that they know that France is a democracy, applicants mostly insist that their relationship to France is not motivated by self-interest. In a context where foreigners are stigmatized as seeking to exploit the rights offered by France by all possible means, they believe this is an even more forceful demonstration of something of the order of subscribing to certain value, and they maintain this justificatory stance. However, some naturalized people consider they hold the right to be naturalized. Mr. Longomba, originally from Congo-Brazzaville as well, holds a management qualification and at the time of the interview worked as a manager in a company. He explained he considered that he was deserving to become French due to his studies in France and his manager's position. In his eyes, it was the value of his training and what he brought to France that gave him not the favor, but the right to become French. And he said, I highlighted during the interview that it was France that was benefiting from me and not me that was benefiting from France. Mr. Longomba's deservingness should therefore allow him to obtain a favor, but rather to exercise a right. And this was also what Mrs. Sadi, from Algerian origin, thought. She said to me, honestly, we were confident. I said to myself, the person who has seen our application, why would he refuse it? Not why would he give it to me, but why would he refuse it? In the discourse of this respondent, deserving to become French means fulfilling the conditions to become French. The naturalized people I interviewed therefore took up the same moral approach to naturalization that was conveyed by the administration in charge of the procedure. In this way, they sought to highlight their deservingness, and using the same argument as the administrative officers, contributed to discrediting those who don't deserve it, or even those who pretend to deserve it and manage to deceive the administration. However, the way these arguments are taken up by naturalized people reframes the question of deservingness as they separate this notion from that of being granted a favor. In this sense, the moral register that they borrow from the practice and rhetoric of the administration does not prevent them from claiming rights. Thank you.
Unfortunately, it's already 12:45, and we have other two speakers, so we cannot comment too much. But of course, we can take one question from the public. Okay.
I just have a short question concerning the word naturalization. Because connected to the word, there is a discourse. Is it not existing in France? Like, in French, it's called Office de Naturalisation.
Yeah.
It's so strange if I imagine that in Germany it would be called Naturalisierung. So I just
It is in English also. I mean, naturalization.
Also,
yeah,
naturalization.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay. But is it critiqued?
It is weird.
Is it critiqued as a?
No, it is not. I mean, of course it underlies all the artificiality of the procedure and the fact that you will never be exactly the same as someone who was born in the citizenship and in the nationality. But there is no official critique of this term.
Okay, we will continue the discussion, and also I think it will be interesting to touch on themes on issues of dual citizenship, and also making a bit comparison between France and Germany, as you are. But we postpone it to later, unfortunately. Okay. So now I'm introducing Akimbode. Akimbode Akimbi. He was born in 1946 in Oxford.
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. I should.
No, stop.
He doesn't want to be introduced.
Stop. My
foot.
I was born.
I was born. Should I continue? Or? Okay. He studied literature and English in Ibadan, Lancaster, and Heidelberg. He lives in Berlin and works as a photographer, curator, and author. In 1987, he received the Stern Coverage Scholarship for his photographic work. He is the founder of the Mzansi Cultural Center in Durban, South Africa, curated amongst others the German contribution for the Bamako Rencontre de la Photographie in Mali, and he was the jury member of the World Press Photo Awards. In his photographic work, he explores the life in urban centers of various countries in Africa, Brazil, and Germany. His work has been shown in numerous exhibitions in Berlin, Barcelona, Havana, Tokyo, and many other cities. And he was part of Simon Njami's exhibition, Africa Remix, that was shown, of course, in Düsseldorf, London, Paris, Tokyo, Stockholm, and Johannesburg. And it's also very dear to us at Savi, to all of us. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Elena. So good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're not too tired. We've been talking for some time. I wanted to talk in anecdotes. Not so much, I didn't prepare a paper. I just talk about my personal experiences as a human being. I've lived almost seven decades. And so I'm trying to negotiate my path through life. And of these 7 decades, I've spent the last 4, almost 5 now, here in Germany. So that's about 44 years here in Germany. But I don't have a German passport. I'm not a German citizen as such, or a German nationality, or whatever you want to call it. I do have a British passport because I was born in Britain, but I also have a Nigerian passport. And it's very interesting for me, taking part in this panel, that actually, personally, I don't see myself as being British or Nigerian. I see myself very much as a person. For some people, unfortunately, a male. black, huh? And I try to negotiate, move my way through life. I think this is very, very important. Unfortunately, and this is a big aspect, and this is why I agree very much with Peggy and Nana as well, being black, having the black skin or brown skin, as you want to say, has a lot of, brings a lot of baggage, especially if you live away from the African continent. But even on the African continent as well, it can be very, very sort of, what's the word, conflicted. But here in Europe or in the States, even in South America, where I've been to as well, it can be very, very, very contested. So one personal anecdote I can tell you about is, for example, I've been living in Kreuzberg for the last 23 years, and some of my neighbors never, ever greet me. I mean, I just can't believe it. Almost 20 years, I see them not on a daily basis, but at least maybe 200-300 times a year. They don't greet me. Whereas some Brazilian neighbors came into, I live in the Vorder house, they came to the Hinter house. Within 5 minutes, they were waving at each other. So that shows you the kind of differences where cultures and peoples and nationalities and sovereignties impose on their people. I'm not saying that the Germans in this particular case are less humane or less friendly or less gastfreundlich. Wie sagt man Gastfreundschaft? Hospitable. But there are some subtle differences. And these subtle differences are what I really find very, very interesting and exciting. So for another example is also when traveling to the African continent, I often have to use my British passport because my Nigerian passport has also become a kind of conflicted document. So sometimes it's much more difficult for me to get a visa to visit some African countries with my Nigerian passport, with my British passport. So suddenly I become a British citizen, and very strange. I'll tell you another anecdote. Once I flew to Bamako, this is about 8-10 years ago, I believe. Yeah, 8-10 years ago. And the lady at the passport control asked me, where is my residency for Europe? Because I was showing her my Nigerian passport. My residency for, I don't have a residency for Europe. I mean, I'm a citizen of Europe. So I showed her my British passport. She immediately grabbed it and ran away with both my passports and took it to her boss, the chief passport officer at the airport there in Bamako. Unfortunately, her boss was having an argument with another passenger who had just arrived, a Malian actually. Very, very violent, sort of verbally violent argument. So that I got involved, trying to calm both of them down. This went on for about 10-15 minutes. And eventually then it settled the matter, then came to my case, and my intervention helped me get my passport back. So this kind of thing. So these are the kind of, sort of ways and means of, I like to use the word surviving. One thing which I find very, very interesting is this question of claiming specific areas of resistance or sort of fighting, or like, I like this term which Bonner used sometime just recently, of being very subversive. And this is very much my style of working. So that, I mean, I am myself. So I just move, do my thing, and I don't let anybody mess around with me. So, for example, I mean, when I was 12 years old, I was then in Britain, going to secondary school, and people would see me, a young black school child, and they would say, yeah, they would call me Cassius Clay. Do people know who that is? Muhammad Ali now. And, this kind of thing. And before then, they had some riots in Britain at that time against the blacks coming in. And I knew about this, but I mean, I'm a young 10, 11, 12-year-old child. I didn't really sort of get it into my head what's going down, but I knew I had to be careful, I had to be watchful. I wasn't actually in London where the riots were, I was in Oxford, but I still moved and negotiated by myself, or sometimes with my siblings or with my parents. And, this kind of thing. So all the time you get this kind of, what I call negative thing. I mean, I actually, I would say I did actually, I like being called Cassius Clay. I'm not a boxer, but I mean, I don't sort of feel myself. I don't see myself being a celebrity or a boxer or something. But I did like his style of way of resisting certain forms of dominance at then. So now you find this thing constantly, you know, all the time, having to sort of, how can I put it? You sort of try to be yourself, really. That's why I say I'm trying very much trying to be myself. So a few years later, for example, in that very same Oxford, some North Europeans saw myself, my brother, and my uncle. I think we were coming from the cinema or something. They started laughing at us and pressing their noses down, laughing at our, you know, flat noses. Man, this really upset me. But I mean, my uncle said, let's go. So we didn't do anything. I mean, there are many different ways. I do know of some black people who would actually hit those girls because there were women doing this. Or, I mean, it becomes a kind of fight or a rougher, as we say in Nigeria. But this is the kind of thing that all the time, especially here, but also in many parts of the world, you always have to sort of come out and be yourself and sort of push your thing through. So it is very much not. I don't do it violently on a you know, what do you call it, an aggressive way. But I always tell, look, don't mess with me, because I mean, I'm this. So now, let's say the last 40 years here in Germany, this has happened so many times. Like sometimes I'm looking for a flat. They say they don't want any black people. They say they don't want any nigger, and a kind nigger in my own. This kind of thing. Okay, I'll leave you. I'll look for somewhere else. Also, sometimes looking for work. There was one instance many years ago in Switzerland. I was doing a photographic job, shooting in an interior. The guy came up to me and said, "Can you photograph?" I said, "Yes." I'm commissioned to do this work. He asked me again, "Can you really photograph?" I said, "Yes, of course." Then I said, "Okay." Then he said, "Okay, then we'll see what you will do." And I heard later he was very satisfied. But I mean, this kind of thing, I just ignore him. So this kind of thing keeps on happening all the time. Recently, I almost lost it because my former wife, who's German, she was coming here to Berlin and looking for a hotel. And just here in Mitte, I went to a hotel and asked for a room for her. And then the receptionist looked at me and then asked her boss, "Can we give him a room?" in German. And then she said no. So this time I walked away. I said, it's better I walk away than start shouting at them. But so it's, I mean, this, I was talking with somebody yesterday, racialism is still very strong and it's still very much there. But I feel in the last 43 years, 44 years I've been here, it's got, how can I put it? It's got a bit less. So these are the kind of things. Not to quote all these theorists and people we've been talking about, although I did like something which Manthia said yesterday about trying to change the imaginaries, which I would say in an English word, I use the mindsets of my person opposite me. So I think being there, claiming myself, that I'm here, this gradually changes the way people look at me as well. So what I've noticed, like in the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years, there's much more acceptance of black people, of the black skin, of black actors on billboards, for example. I was telling somebody also yesterday, it started with Carl Lewis and also with Naomi Campbell back in the 80s. It's now very common. So, but before, never. Never here in Germany you would ever see a black person on the billboards. I'm talking about the 60s and 70s. But now it's really changed over. So these are the kind of things. And I'm not saying it's a positive trend, 100%, but there's much more acceptance. Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
No, maybe only 5 minutes more because we have to then.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I hope you've got a small impression of where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Anyways, we're coming back to this possibility of changing the imaginaries when Nana is going to answer to Angela later, I think, if you're not too scared. But now, to conclude, yeah, Bonaventure? Yes, sorry. Because Can we continue until what time? You can do it for sure? Because at 2, it's planned to be the other panel, right? And we need a break, but no, please.
Okay. What I just wanted to say was that, and all the presentations are really, really good and brilliant, but it's a kind of a self-critique. That we're talking about citizenships and about the Berlin Congo Conference, and we are not situating ourselves also on the African continent in a certain way. We're not talking about citizenship on the African continent, countries, you know, these nationalities that were basically also forced upon us. And I just want to give a small anecdote. I had an argument with my father some 10 years ago, and it was about football, Cameroon against Nigeria, classic. We lost. So what happened? At the end of the match, my father said, this thing called Cameroon, I don't even know. You see, I am Ngemba. So again, what is this thing, this nationality, this citizenship, what does it mean? So it's, the self-critique is that we put up a panel and they're giving all brilliant talks, but not situating it within the African continent too, you see, not saying that the other ones are more or less important. So, but I think it would have been good to see how this concept of citizenship, which was forced on the continent in certain places, because Cameroon doesn't exist in the mentality of my grandfather. It doesn't. You know, he is in Ngemba, he's always been in Ngemba, he speaks the Ngemba. So English and French are fiction to him, just like the borders of that country, you know. So where do we see, how do we see that? How do we think about that? You know, who writes about that? You know, so that's something I was missing. It was just burning in me. Okay, thank you.
Right, and the panel was actually thought to talk about these things, but of course then everybody's bringing it's her own or his own perspective and history and biographical, but then we can go there. Exactly. So, but let's finish with Alessandro with the contributions, and then we discuss all together. So you can be introduced again, but yesterday you've been introduced already, so I'm going to be shorter. So. Yesterday we were telling about your position as former professor of Sub-Saharan African history at L'Orientale, but today maybe we stress more also your role as activist, as you said yesterday, and responsible for the archive of migrant memories in Rome. And about the publications, we said already yesterday, remapping Ethiopia, socialism and after, state, power, a new political actor in post-colonial Africa, Amharic text, dopo la violenza, after the violence, and so on. So thank you, Alessandro, for being with us again, also today. And
well, thank you for coming, and we are late. So can we sort of have some darkness and, you know, why don't we watch these small things? These small things is a return to Lampedusa by a Somali migrant who landed there in 2008, was given a number, because in Lampedusa you are given a number and recognized by a number, and was recognized as a refugee. Somalia is in fact one of those countries where citizenship and even state was imposed by the Italians. And after 4 years, he went back as a free man, looking for the memory that he had lost in the place where he landed. Lampedusa is a small island, closer to Africa than to Italy. Closer to Africa than to Italy. And it is geographically, it belongs to the African continent. And it is, you know, it is the liminal entry to Europe. People arrive in Lampedusa and suddenly they are entering into a liminal space where they are to be, quote unquote, naturalized, sanitized, interrogated, and seen if they are fit to stay or to be rejected. And in the past 20 years, some 250,000 migrants came to Italy and Europe through Lampedusa. Now Lampedusa has a population of 6,000 people. 6,000 people. So the government has played a trick on Lampedusa and has... No. Take the sound off. And no, this is not... it should be to whom it may concern.
Okay.
The government trick has been to play the humanitarian aspect of Lampedusa, showing, how the people were accepted there and with the Red Cross and so on, while in fact people were given numbers and were sort of sanitized, as I said before, and hurriedly to other places where they stayed for several months before they were known whether they would be expelled or not. In 2008, the Italian government passed a law called Security Package, whereby all migrants were considered clandestines, that is, intruders, in Italian society. And let's start, but for this we want to be, can you start again and from the beginning? And this is Zaccaria, who goes back to the island in 2012, 4 years after arriving. Let's see what he has to say.
Alcune persone dicevano, lì è Lampedusa, quella direzione. No, no. Okay. Che c'è questa isola che si chiama Lampedusa.
I thought rather than, giving a speech at the end of today, I wanted to show you this. This is the sort of things that we're trying to encourage, facilitate. Part of the archive is to empower arriving migrants to have their own stories told in their own words through means of film, videos, photographs, and other ways. Someone mentioned before, Peggy, I think, mentioned before the act of resistance to claim for citizenship. We started our work during Berlusconi's government, and we clearly wanted to resist what was going on. And since Berlusconi had all the TV images and all the media in his favor, we started these things, making movies and exporting it to everywhere that anybody, a small group, a parish, a social center, wherever, schools, who were available to see it and discuss it. And we would always send the person who had done the movies, that is a migrant himself or herself, to the class, to the place, to explain what they had done and why they were doing it. And the idea was to create empathy, and to create empathy for the basic human values that no one would object, at least openly. Now, whether it worked or not, is another point. The thing that I wanted to show you is, I call this the Lampedusa dump, because those boats have been set to fire since. Lampedusa is a place of dissent and rebellion and resistance also, in Italy and in the island. Lampedusa has a strong tourist, is a tourist area, and at the same time, the lure of tragedy and death. Lampedusa is surrounded by tourists and death. And these things that tourists who go there just to be suntanned and swim in perfectly beautiful waters, but, in those same waters, not very distant, there are human bodies. And so, all this is the the contradiction that is lived in the Lampedusa dump. So the government is using the Lampedusa to create the sense of invasion. And so the government piles migrants in Lampedusa until there's some explosion of revolt, whether by the migrants or by the local population. And this gives the idea that we are being invaded. So this has been the constant, play of the government narrative. So we've tried to go back to the dump, and we discovered lots of things. We discovered diaries, letters, pictures, photographs, and we started, piling them together. And, it's a long story. I mean, the museum never really took off because, and this is the only last thing I want to say, Lampedusa, you should remember, is not Italy, properly speaking, in a sense. It is a penal colony used as an island to send transgressors, rebels, and a place where, there was local mobility for fishermen because, there's lots of fishing around there. So Lampedusa is a very contradictory place. It is a dumping ground of memory. Zaccaria went there to look for his own documents or for his friends' own documents, which have been taken away, like anything else of human that belongs to these people arriving, because it can be dirty or it can be, it's considered not to be of any value. And at the same time, Lampedusa is seen as some sort of, because it is an entry to Europe, it is considered to be a sort of the place where the border spectacle has to be created, with proper Navy, Red Cross, humanitarian, UNSHCR, Médecins Sans Frontières, everybody and everything is there to set, for the widely broadcast picture of thousands and thousands and thousands of people arriving in Europe and what is Europe to do with it. So now we are objecting to it. We're strongly objecting to it. We think there is, these are people who are the new sort of, the new citizen, the new European citizens. And our type of, help that we try to give to them is to help them to express themselves. And to help them to express themselves in a way that can be diffused in schools, in places, and so that their claim for citizenship, of course, these are not citizenship, and in Italy, they will never be citizen until the law of which respects the ius sanguinis and not the ius soli is changed. So I don't want to make it this, if you are interested, then you can ask me more. But basically, this is what I wanted to say. Lampedusa is the dumping ground. It's the place where, the memory is of the people. Many of them come from ex-colonial countries, is taken away, is, alienated, and it is the place where the dumping ground also of human rights. So the Lampedusa dump is a very symbolic place to understand how difficult it is to enter Europe today, and at the same time, how little care there is for Europe's memory of its colonial past. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. And this is actually bringing back us to the introduction that I did at the beginning. This vivid image of Lampedusa is really recalling me this idea of immunitas, this idea of protection and negation of life together, and the paradox of which Esposito is talking. So we really wanted to plan to have a discussion all together, but I don't know how you're feeling, because at 2 o'clock the other panel is starting and some people need to have a break and to eat something, but So if there is something that somebody wants to say, or also if some of the speakers want to address shortly, one or the other one. Otherwise, we have to organize, and we will do it, another panel, another conference, and of course, this is just always a beginning. And okay.
I have a question that relates to like this need for further discussion and running out of time and everything. I was wondering if you will have some kind of space online to continue the discussion, to stay in touch. Maybe some people can post links to the names of female writers or theorists or other voices, things we might have not had time to write down, maybe links to films you would have liked to show. This kind of thing, like trying to find a way to extend that platform beyond these 3 days or beyond the exhibition. I don't know.
That's a good idea. We don't have a blog actually, but we can try to organize it. Otherwise, you can just write to us. Yes, but we are a bit busy, but let's see. But otherwise, you just can send email to us at Savvy Contemporary, and then we're forwarding to the speakers, and we are putting you in contact, and we can work as a platform.
Well, at least I want to bring the discussion back to what was being said on the panel, and also already with some of the questions, because it reminds me of that here again. That this is, of course, I mean, that's a great idea. The question is who's doing it, then also who is filling in the space. So we are actually talking about epistemic frames. And that is what we are actually trying to do here. And I tried it a little bit by sorting out the we and the all, etc. And then it links back to the question of, I absolutely understand this need of lists of counter knowledge, and that's exactly what it is. But can we please keep in mind that somebody has to do this work to get this counter knowledge? And I already talked about that. We are getting up every morning to do not everything all over. You know, we developed 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 years and survived as a collective body. And in all of this time, what we did every day, again, was I'm also getting up to reinforce the notion that I exist, to reinforce the notion of claiming citizenship, of claiming visibility. And it's not just that there is somewhere a library to tap in. So that brings me back also to the really important notion of the perspective matters. In a sense, I would have loved to meet Zakaria Muhammad Ali to talk about what it means to be in Italy and trying to get resources, talking about the connections and collaborations he's doing with you, in order to understand what African diasporic lives means for us and that with respect Italy. And not again being talked about him. And I mean, what I saw was just that it really touches my heart. So what I want to keep, and then now I mean all of us in mind, is we all have a perspective and a positionality, and we all have apparently to bring something to the table. And because right now I feel a little burdened, I know it was Nana being asked, but I feel like, oh, I know all of that, It's just what Nana offered us was to see, wow, there's something more to the negritude than what I usually get offered, what I usually get reproduced. So I'm a little also ready for a break. But so what I call that an epistemic trap. And I feel like that right now we're reinforcing this epistemic trap, in a sense of that we need to point it out, we cannot solve everything, but to keep it in mind, it's not something where you tap in to get, librarian information, to get something else, sources, etc. That's hard work. And it's also hard work in a sense of hard work. It's close to our heart because it undigs and unearths and over again our lives. So, and we would love to have this epistemic frame valued, revalued, and being lifted up, and that we will not achieve, and I don't talk about help here, but we will not achieve while it is being marginalized again and again, and this whole dynamics are in the same way marginalizing. That is what I'm trying to say. I had a couple of other things to say, but I keep that.
Okay.
You know, we would have wished Zakaria to be here, but Zakaria was here, a guest of the Böll Foundation not long time ago, and he showed these sort of things. We also wanted Dagmawi, whose film we were showing tomorrow. But, you know, the pressure on migrants at this moment in Italy is such that they cannot move. There's reason of moving outside, but also they are losing their work if they go too much. So the act of resistance has to be modulated also on their basic needs. And I quite agree on your epistemic request, but there are some hard realities that make it quite difficult for them. So we consider ourselves as facilitators. That's
in any case, would you mention that because we tried to get here? Yes. Right. It was just so difficult. I mean, we would like anything more than to have him around. Just on that note.
No, I believe that, but just let's keep in mind, that's why I mean, if you remember, I'm saying that very often, and not because I like to repeat myself, but I think that is one of the major strategy. We need to keep that in mind. The end of the film, which told us, it's about the value of human beings, and also to say, we can teach you human value. I mean, I find that really, really deep. That goes to all of us, in a sense that we, try to find, and this is not a criticism, I know what it means. I mean, we are about to organize another major conference where you have to already plan it in that people will not show up because they don't get visas where it is even possible to get visas. So we know all of that. But how can we do it to actually provide the space, which is, I mean, that is a huge request to us. Zakaria, Muhammad Ali, and this perspective, and it is about this perspective. We talked about that here. So as different as our papers were, but it was all about an African diaspora perspective. So how can we provide the space that it is possible, what he said, we can teach you human value, which should be already very humbling to all of us.